So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to something entirely different. I don't know what sort of wizardry has gone on to actually make this possible. I know that they've done it via a scenario, but what we have here, I believe, is an 8-way battle. So this is a free-for-all in which there are 8 teams, which should prove to be probably the most chaotic battle that I've ever shown. Now, obviously there are some downsides to this in the sense that these two players in the middle, poor King Amar over there and Blindness, have to sit in the middle of this madness because of the way that the deployment zones have to work, I suppose, because there's only so much you can do when there are 8 different teams on a single battlefield. But such as it is, I think the Hobbits and Khazad Dum, to be fair, have got some tools at their disposal which should make this a little bit less painful, and it's not as if they're completely without cover. But just the fact that we're going to be watching an 8-way battle here, I think, is going to be a very interesting thing indeed, which means we're probably going to be making very liberal use of the half-speed option here, because I would imagine there's going to be quite a lot going on throughout the course of this battle. And of course, the player who sent this one to me was Guro-Chan, because obviously this is, when something like this happens, obviously it's going to be one of the main devs that gives it to me, because it's going to be new and something experimental that they're toying with. And yeah, I think it's a sign really that the development team has got an awful lot of experience, I think, at this point with Medieval 2 and working with Medieval 2, that this is even able to work in the first place. So it does go to show that the old game still has a few surprises left in it yet. And Kuro is going to be playing as Karn, which, to be fair, if I was going into an 8-way free-for-all, this would probably be one of the factions I would heavily consider, because you've got a lot of mobility, your infantry isn't weak by any means, they can definitely wall up and defend themselves, and you have a few unique tools which are very useful as well. So he's gone for some Nurad footmen and some Nurad halberds in behind, of course, the classic resilient Khandish front line, especially with regards to those big shields. Their actual armour values are not quite as impressive as particularly the Western Kingdoms, but the big shield value really does make up for that in a lot of ways, and of course the fact they have AP attacks in melee is very, very useful. Definitely one of those AP line-up units which is definitely worth it. Similar in many ways to the Flag Rim, although not quite as strong individually as the Golden Boys. And the halberds obviously in behind offer you that nice phalanx. Also have the Hwacha, which is again a very useful piece of artillery, very different to how the Ribolt was in standard Medieval 2, which always seemed to be very underwhelming to me. But the Hwacha, on the other hand, especially on an open field like this, if an opponent intends to sit back against you, this makes it really a very undesirable prospect to do so. I'm not sure how useful it will be in an 8-way battle, to be fair, because it doesn't have that much ammunition and you can only really target one player with it. And it looks as though he intended to go through the middle with that, albeit he's got to worry about his flanks as well. Just in behind, we've got some Brotherhood of the Axe and some Nurad Stormguard. In many ways, they're both shock infantry. The Stormguard are technically polearms, which means they have a really nasty anti-cavalry bonus, and they're maybe vulnerable in some of the same ways that polearms are. But the Brotherhood of the Axe, obviously single HP, but very, very deadly. Probably the best of the infantry Brotherhood units, to be honest. The Spear are very resilient, but to be fair, the rest of the Khandish infantry line, resilience isn't really a problem. Having a damage dealer in there maybe is, and the Brotherhood of the Axe do provide that. The Stormguard, as I was saying, they are technically halberds, albeit they have lost their phalanx formation quite a while ago, to be fair, because the last patch was a fair time ago, several months. But the Nurad Stormguard, to be fair, they were a little bit too much with the phalanx. Now they are more akin to something like the Fountain Guard in terms of overall effectiveness when it comes to dealing damage. At least that's the kind of numbers you can expect. But the fact that they're multiple HP and they have a massive anti-cavalry bonus as a result of being polearms means they're a really good place to put your general, honestly, and they're still very, very effective, really. Got some nomadic infantry and some nomadic raiders in the army as well. Nomadic infantry obviously significantly better equipment, so they're going to be good at absorbing that damage. And the nomadic raiders, of course, they're low tier archers, but they're here in such numbers that they should still contribute greatly to the army. And over here we have some nomadic light cavalry, so the lighter horse archers. Horse archers, of course, maybe not so much as you would expect from Karn in this situation, so it tells me that Kuro is going to take it slowly in this battle, which is probably a good idea. You don't want to sort of be running around all over the place with cavalry, because your army will be fairly ineffectual against single armies. You'll just be more of a nuisance than anything. So trying to consolidate and just use your horse archers in support of your main army here is probably the best way to do things. And of course, having the Variag cataphracts in any sort of open battle is going to be a very desirable thing as well, because lance knights are so powerful in this setting. And back here we have a couple of units of Brotherhood of the Shadows, which are of course the Assassins. Assassins are a difficult kind of unit to use, to be honest. They can be very damaging, but they are also very vulnerable. So hiding them until the late game, I suppose, is what he intends to do here. We'll go clockwise around the map, I think, and then go through the middle. So we have Steward of Dale, who's playing as Rhudaur, another good choice for this, I think, because you've got plenty of disposable numbers, but you also have some really nasty damaging units which you can use towards the end of the battle when everyone's running out of steam. Rhudaur Marksmen will be good in a skirmish fight because of all their ammunition and their numbers. Dunland Spearmen, obviously, just as a bit of a buffer. Got some Coldfell Maidens in here as well, so again, maneuverability, Jav Cav, useful for sort of shutting down enemy cavalry as long as you micro them effectively. Obviously if they get caught in melee by something like the Variag Cataphracts, they're doomed, but as long as you micro them effectively, that shouldn't be an issue. Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters are pretty much a must for Rhudaur, I would suggest, because again, they're one of the few Rhudaur units which does actually pack on a bit of armour, and also Javelins, of course. If you're not using the Javelins and Axe Throwers to your advantage as Rhudaur, you're hobbling yourself really, because it is their main focus. Rhudaur Swordsman with the Franadine Pikemen over here, ready to form up an effective front line, supported by the upgraded Rhudaur Clansmen as well, which are decently damaging for spears of this cost anyway. They're not going to move mountains for you, but they're still going to do okay in terms of damage relative to other spears, and of course big shields, and with the armour upgrade as well, they're just all round a pretty decent unit. As is the case with a lot of Rhudaur's front line, to be honest with you. Individually they're nothing special, but they add up to be something really rather awkward to deal with, especially when you consider the amount of numbers that you have at your disposal, and if you ignore Javelins as Rhudaur while you're busy hacking through all these numbers, that can be your downfall when facing off against them. Rhudaur Marksmen, Rhudaur Clansmen, more Coldfell Maidens over there, more Swordsmen, another unit of Franadine Pikemen as well, some more Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters, and once again, unsurprisingly, seeing the Lance Knights here, the Franadine Nobles. I prefer the Franadine Nobles without the armour upgrade as well. I like seeing the sort of patchwork coat of plates crossed with mail that they have sort of on the front, and it gives them sort of more of a scavenged armour sort of look to them, which sort of suits the Northman a little bit more, I think. Over here, in the far south end of the map, we have Dunland, played by Mr. Sneakman, so this is a pretty bold faction to take in this. I mean, you're going to have a lot of numbers at your disposal, lots of Dunman Spearmen, lots of Dunman Pikemen, all sorts of numbers at your disposal. You're going to be very reliant, however, on units such as this, the Spears of Orthanc crossbows, crossed with heavily armoured spears, to really do the heavy lifting for you. But perhaps having a lot of numbers in this chaotic setting is the way to win. We'll have to wait and see. He's got a lot of Dunlanding veterans as well, what passes for line infantry for Dunland. But to be fair, they're okay. I mean, you could definitely do I'd say far worse. You could definitely do slightly worse in terms of having a backbone to your army in this. The Orcs will probably know all about that if you were numbers focused. But yeah, Dunlanding veterans, lots of them as well, so you can just see the breadth that this army has, but there's not a huge amount of quality, let's be honest. Half-Orc Baneguard. He also has some Walk Riders just for a bit of mobility, which again, in a setting like this, is it's definitely a good idea, and he's got some Baneguard here and there as well for a bit of AP. Not seeing the Riders of Orthanc, unless they can hide anywhere, which I don't believe they can. But that would be an interesting omission, to be honest with you, because they are very effective. Very, very strong unit indeed, both in melee and at range with those crossbows, of course. Just in the middle here, Blindness, of course, playing as Khazad Dum. He's got some crossbows. Once again, mobility, and Khazad Dum's options for mobility are very limited, but their strengths do come elsewhere. Speaking of which, we can see that he's got the tactical geometry already set up, but we can definitely forgive him on this occasion because he's in the middle of what's going to be a really chaotic battle, I think. Meteor Guard with 3 hit points, backed up with some pikes. That's going to be a very difficult area to try and force your way through. Some sentries, some 2nd Legion Axe Guard without the armour upgrade, but the AP should still be useful, albeit not really against Dunland, to be honest, unless they're fortunate enough to catch the Spears of Orthanc out. Orc Hunters of Khazad Dum, so as far as archers go, they're actually pretty decent, especially at dealing damage, but it is really the only standard ranged option you have as Khazad Dum. Of course, you have a non-standard one here, in the Iron Watch of Miramir, a brutally effective unit in the right situation, albeit on open maps like this, they are slightly more difficult to use than they are on enclosed sieges, but even so, like, the damage they're capable of doing is still very extreme, so enemies are going to have to really watch out for them. Hammers of Gundabad, 1st Legion Pikes, Orc Hunters of Khazad Dum. We've got some 2nd Legion in here as well, some Sons of the Fallen over on this side backing up some sentries, so yeah, he's definitely walled himself up and he is ready to face the oncoming storm. Over here we have King Ammar playing as the Hobbit folk, albeit we can only see a small portion of his army because of course so many of the Hobbit units can hide. I'd imagine he's got all sorts, like battling Brandybucks, Farmers of Buckland, Definitely hobbitry and arms, that sort of thing. All the archers, Banderbrass archers, Tookish hunters. But he's also got some Ents, obviously. Again, very similar to trolls. That's the sort of role they play. Beornings, which are monstrous cavalry. The only thing I really compare them to would probably be the War Beasts from Harad. But they are technically heavy cavalry units, so they've got a brutal charge on them. But they are somewhat different in the way that they're supposed to be used, I suppose. They are very much an all-rounder, but you do have to be careful as the hobbits while using them, because they can be overwhelmed, because very often you'll see them just doing their thing on their own, which can obviously leave them exposed. And Proudfoot protectors. Pikes crossed with crossbows are such a difficult combination to deal with, because if you stay at range, out of range of their pikes, obviously you're just going to get shot to pieces. But if you try and charge in with cavalry to deal with them, which is one way to effectively deal with crossbows and shut them down quickly, the pikes are going to cut you to ribbons. So got to definitely be careful there. Over here, Dorwinion, played by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud. Dorwinion's an interesting faction, definitely. They have one way of doing things and they're good at it, but it can often leave them feeling a bit one-dimensional. Elvelyn infantry backed up by Elvelyn marksmen is definitely a slow-working composition for the front here. The elves are needed to really do some damage. The Morroquendi pikes can really help shore things up. Nandor Glade Riders are really effective off the charge, but also very, very fragile. So I think micro is going to be important here, because I think most of the main body of this Dorwinion army is just here to hold, whereas I think the Nandor Glade Riders, 3 units of them by the looks of things, and obviously the Glade Lords, which are a little bit different, they're much more resilient, because they are Lance Knights, of course. We'll have to wait and see how Dorwinion does. There's probably a few hidden units around here as well, Keldon River Patrol, Morroquendi Bows, and the like. Up here in the north we have WK playing as Harad. He's got some Southron archers, some Demons of the Desert. He's pointing this way, so he's going to be trying to go after Cardolan over there by the looks of things, which Cardolan, decent foe for Harad to fight, I think, because Harad can really be tough to stop when they get going, and Cardolan's morale could buckle and make their job even easier if they go all in on them, which you'll have to wait and see. Southron Warband and Pikemen offering a lot of AP on the front, a lot more AP in behind as well with the Trollmen and the Champions. Haradrim Spearmen just to bulk things out on the flanks. We've got some Southron Lancers and some Serpent Guard here, so some more basic Lancers, which you don't see an awful lot of, to be honest with you, in online, because generally if you can afford to bring the higher tier of cavalry, you should bring it. But to be fair, Harad only have multiple HP Lancers and not Knights, so you could see it as a worthwhile endeavour to try and just bring your cheaper units and go all in for your infantry and such, and some Beast Hunters as well. So pretty much what you'd expect from Harad. A supporting army around a core of trollmen, and then a little bit of mobility as well, just to tie things off. Excuse me. And finally we have Aqua, who's playing as Cardolan. As I said, we've got a full front line of Greenway Garrison footmen, nice and efficient. Cheap pikes like this can be a really good way to just hold down the front line, but they will need some support. Alone, they're going to find themselves getting shot up pretty significantly. I think Minhiriath spears, Minhiriath sharpshooters, this is going to be a problem for Harad if they don't shut them down quickly. Crossbows, of course, are the main way, or the main reason I should say, to fear Cardolan. Manatar Romen gatekeepers at the centre of things, more spears. Dunedain captains in behind, albeit without the armour upgrade this time. They're still a very effective heavy swordsman. We have some Hearthguard of Amon Sul, very nice morale battery. Tharbad Warhammers, very dangerous with their armour piercing attacks. Some more sharpshooters. And back here, Tharbad Riders and Royal Court of House Thorondor, so some very nasty aggressive cavalry here. The Royal Court are much more survivable with their multiple HP and their armour, but the Tharbad Riders have got just as good a charge, and you know they really are a hidden gem in the Cardolan line. They do have a habit of breaking if you use them incorrectly and charge them into enemy lines where they're not going to survive, but that's the risk you take, I suppose. And without further ado, let's begin. Very interested to see how this battle goes. Unlike a normal free-for-all, which of course is going to be a 2v2v2v2, this is going to be a lot more chaotic. I think engaging in the politics of a free-for-all, as I often call it, is going to be more difficult on this occasion, just because the battle is going to change so quickly, I think. Who seems to be gaining the upper hand is going to change as it goes along. It's going to be interesting to see here. You can see the frames are already struggling just a little bit, which is interesting, to be honest with you. Well, there are the Great Eagles, another unit which the Hobbits have access to now. The Hobbits have become sort of a little bit of an area where, like, the races that aren't orcs, men, elves or dwarves, they all get put into the Hobbit folk faction. So we've got the Eagles, the Ents, all of the Hobbits of course, the Skin Changers technically, and the Beornings. the Hobbits are actually going right for them as well. It is quite interesting to see this in action. So the Hobbits going full in against the Dwarves of Khazad Dum when they're already set up. But of course, with Dunland coming in from behind, Blindness's immobility here could prove to be a massive issue. And of course you can see Dorwinion also menacing the flanks as well. And I think actually we're going to already go down to half speed because we're going to start to see things get underway very quickly. Coldfell Maidens coming in, trying to go after the Carndish position. So Rhudaur following Carnd in as they were moving towards the middle, but now I think Carnd are going to have to turn around and instead try and meet the advance of Rhudaur. The Coldfell Maidens are going in here. They are going to collide with the Nomadic Raiders, but they're not really going to get a charge off because they were throwing their javelins at the same time, and I don't know if they're going to last too long, but over here this is going to be a lot more painful than for the Nomadic Infantry because the Granadine Nobles do have their lances down, and they are going to carve right through the higher tier of Carndish Foot Archer here, which is a shame because the Nomadic Infantry are a very good unit for their abilities at range and actually in melee. They make a decent makeshift infantry unit, which later on could have been very, very useful for Kuro, but less so now with a whole chunk of that unit taken out. But good move from Rhudaur. We saw Carnd was going all in from the front, and he decided to come in from behind, and he sort of caught them unawares now, and Carnd is having to shift around, but it remains to be seen whether Rhudaur actually get into position quickly enough to take advantage of what they have done. Meanwhile over here, don't know what on earth happened here, but it looks as though the cavalry unit of Southron Riders charged into Lumberman, and I think they're still on the field to be fair, but we are going to see Cardolan go up against Harad. Once again, Cardolan was siphoning some units off to go into the conflict that was emerging between Carnd and Rhudaur, but now they're having to sort of turn around because Harad's intention was always to go all in against Cardolan. You could tell that from how they had set up. And Southron archers and javelins now firing their payloads in, softening Cardolan up. And in melee, I don't really fancy Cardolan's chances. They're really going to have to get their crossbows into position to try and stop those trollmen from just having their way with their main army. Meanwhile, I actually see over here Dorwinion taking advantage perhaps of, or trying to take advantage anyway, of the Hobbits moving in aggressively against Khazad Dum. We can see the Morroquendi Glade Lords here getting butchered really by the Bjornings as they came charging, and I think it was actually a charge from the Bjornings that may have caused this, but it's not really the sort of foe you want to be taking on in terms of pure brute strength, the Bjornings. Maybe if you were able to get your lances down into a charge against them, you could do a bit of damage right off the bat. You can see here actually Khazad Dum now leaving their tactical geometry, and instead they're going to try and batter their way through the layered Hobbit lines. The Hobbitry in arms, of course, doesn't stand a chance against some of these really strong Dwarven infantry units, but of course it's the specialty units that the Hobbits are really all about, and you can see there the Hammers of Gundabad getting absolutely rinsed by the Great Eagles. A truly devastating blow on them, but of course Khazad Dum have got their own toys, and in particular the Iron Watch of Miramir, who are back here. They are firing into the Hobbit lines, they are going to be doing some damage. And Dorwinion are in behind. This is bad news for the Hobbits, to be honest with you. They've aggressively moved forward, but they haven't really left enough in reserve. I mean, Dorwinion's Nandor Glade Riders are going to come in. They're going to do a lot of damage. They are going to charge into the Proudfoot Protectors. They're going to need to cycle out pretty quickly, I would think, though, because the Proudfoot Protectors with those pikes, especially against a more fragile cavalry unit like the Glade Riders, are going to be more of a problem. But yeah, immediately I can say one thing. Dunland are the real winners at this point because they're the only ones that haven't been baited into a fight just yet, which is good for Mr. Sneakman. He's just sort of biding his time. Maybe he'll wait until, because it looks like the Hobbits are actually in the roughest situation with Dorwinion coming in from the side. They're having to fight Khazad Dum from the front. It's not really a situation you want to be in. But at the last moment, perhaps Dunland would come in and then clean up Khazad Dum, and it could become a fight then between a reasonably healthy Dunland against a battered and bruised Dorwinion, if he plays it correctly. Point blank firing from the Watcher here as they fire into the Rhudaur swordsman. The shaky camera effect that the rockets tend to produce. Clansmen shaken, swordsmen shaken. Yeah, these basic Rhudaur units can suffer from morale a little bit. Rhudaur's morale is actually not as bad as a lot of the other evil men, Carnd included. You can see already how chaotic this is to really keep track of. We've actually got several sort of microcosms on this battlefield of sort of individual battles going on. We've got the fight in the middle, which is sort of brewing to be maybe a 4-player encounter, and then 2 side battles between individual players. Ettenwall's Troll Hunters taking a bit of damage here, and I mean, Nurad Halberds are routing, the Ferodrum Javelins firing their payload in. But they're already routing, so that's actually a bit of a waste of ammunition. But the Ferodrum Javelins are good in melee as well, so it's not a complete loss, but here you can see the Brotherhood of the Axe moving in. They're going to just carve their way through Rhudaur swordsmen, but the front line is going to be a problem, I think, for Khan, because the Thranduil pikemen are here, and also there are Trollshaw axe throwers, so I mean it's going to be rough. I think Rhudaur will probably win over here just because of the presence of the pikes. Their strong units are also being focused down by axe throwers, so it's a rough situation there, but elsewhere I think Rhudaur is spread a little bit too thin. And I think in particular with stuff like the artillery doing massive morale damage to some of these sort of side blobs. The problem is I don't know if Khan are going to be able to counter-attack into Rhudaur without taking massive damage, really, from the archers. I mean, they have committed their Brotherhood of the Shadows. They have now collided with the Rhudaur marksmen. I think maybe Kuro was hoping to save them for a little bit later in the battle, but needs must, to be honest with you. He needs to commit them now. He needs to start doing some damage to these supporting units of Rhudaur back here, and maybe get into the rear of that Rhudaur blob, but a closely fought battle indeed here. We'll see who starts to gain the upper hand. Actually, Harad over here, defeat seems certain for them on the front line, so the pikes holding things down, the Minhiriat doing very well down here in the southern part of the line. But you can see where the champions of Nafrat were. They've started to really just wrap up the line here. The Cardolan cavalry is on hand to potentially stop the Haradjan cavalry from moving in, but you can see Cardolan, their cavalry is standing still. They really need to start moving all elements of their army. They are actually pushing through over there, so where Harad is winning up here, Cardolan are winning down there, but I just think Harad are going to do a better job at slowing Cardolan's push down, whereas Cardolan are caught a bit flat-footed up here, and I think Harad, when a battle starts to look like this, you always back the faction that's got a little bit more going for them in pure melee, just pure strength. And definitely in this matchup you would say that that is Harad with all their AP. The Trollmen are such an impressive core to the army. Harad are quite reliant on them, to be honest. But especially against basic Minhiriat stuff. I mean, Cardolan do have... Khan is struggling a little bit, but I mean, Cardolan do have some individually impressive units. But even here, like the Trollmen, they probably will lose against the Tharbad Warhammers, especially with some pike support, but they're still going to take some beating, and by the time that happens, I think Harad will be fine. We'll see though, maybe the crossbows get into a good position, firing along the line, starting to, you know, stop the flanking units, or at least try to, slowing everything down. That may be Cardolan's way back into this. Meanwhile, over here you can see that it really has been tough for the Hobbits, but it's also now going to be tough for Khazad Dum because all the losses they've taken, and now they're going to have to face a horde of Dunlandings as they pour down from the raised terrain over there. The Ents and the Bjornings. I think King Ammar sees the situation he's in at this point, and he's going to scurry away to the edge of the map to try and save something. It was tough on him though. He was having to fight Khazad Dum in an infantry slog, which few factions are going to escape from unscathed. And he was having to deal with Dorwinion cavalry from behind, which, to be fair, I mean, you can see there are quite a few dead Dorwinion riders, but the charges did connect, and against a faction which ultimately is made up of squishy units, it's going to be tough for them. Dorwinion are now moving in as well, though, so the dwarves still find themselves caught between a rock and a hard place, really, as Dorwinion are still here. Dunland are moving in aggressively now. The Great Eagles are still here. They are being hounded by the Nandor Glade Riders. Two units which are all about the charge, really. If the Great Eagles can escape and get up to charge speed, they probably will turn around, but it is interesting, isn't it? It does look as though the Glade Riders have got a bit of a speed advantage on them, and they are technically cavalry. In the game's eyes, these units are travelling along the ground, so if the Glade Riders do catch up to them, the Great Eagles will then be forced to ground, and that's not where they want to be. The Great Eagles do not have a melee attack. They can only charge. They gave up the chase there though, so the Hobbits have really all of their strongest units left alive, but the main body of their army lies in ruins. Let's go back up to 1 speed. The Varia Cataphracts are still alive. Even a unit of depleted knights can still be a real problem child for the enemy, should you use them efficiently. Going to try and go through here. That's actually the Khandish General. I mean, the Rhudaur swordsmen are struggling mightily against the Storm Guard, as you would imagine, but the front line fight over here did go in Rhudaur's favour. You can see over here as well the Brotherhood of the Axe doing the business against the Etenwall's Troll Hunters in melee. And up over here we can see that the Brotherhood of the Shadows, I mean, they are going to win over here, but they are ultimately being bogged down in unimportant Rhudaur units, which is exactly what Steward of Dale wants to do here. If he can keep those assassins at arm's length, he can try and move his pikes in, try and control the battle that way, but whoever comes out on top of this fight is going to have little remaining. and they're definitely going to have to assess the situation and bide their time, I think, once they're finished bleeding one another dry. Another volley of arrows there going into the Franadine pikemen. Rhudaur swordsmen and pikes colliding with the Storm Guard. They're probably going to be overwhelmed at this point. Reforged javelins also moving in, so you can see that parts of the Carnage line, many parts of it really, have been compromised at this stage. So I would think Rhudaur should probably go on to win this. There's one Franadine noble left remaining. He won't accomplish much all on his lonesome. Nomadic raiders are routing. Varia cataphracts are still here. Let's not forget, a unit like this could honestly be the difference between a faction losing and winning ultimately. When the late game rolls around, I have a feeling it will be, like, a few factions will have very depleted units they've saved for a rainy day. There goes the Carnage General. Yeah, it's looking pretty bad for Khan, to be honest with you. Speaking of which, how are Cardolan getting on? They're trying to stop Harad's momentum, and they have succeeded, to be fair. They're doing a pretty decent job of things at this stage. In come the Serpent Guard charging into the Gwathlo trackers, doing a lot of damage to them. You can see the champions of Nafrat are way back over here trying to save the Harad archer line, which they will be able to do. Champions of Nafrat will easily be able to get the better of Minhiriath's spearmen. And what have we here? Southron archers. Muhad beast hunters. You can actually see that maybe Cardolan's crossbows have been able to do that damage over time, because Harad are looking a little bit... It's looking like their momentum is abandoning them a little bit. What have we got going on over there? Dorwinion are moving in. Moving up towards this way anyway. Hearthguard of Amon Sul getting attacked by Muhad beast hunters, but the cavalry's trying to do its thing. But yeah, I think maybe the crossbows have had the desired effect, because the trollmen are not really here in great numbers anymore. The Harad archers are trying to do their thing, shooting against this blob. Similar to Rhudaur, though, in their fight against Khan, whoever manages to come out on top here is going to be looking pretty worse for wear when all is said and done. Meanwhile, Dorwinion are now moving in a small portion. Where on earth is... Dunland have instead decided to not go up against Khazad Dum. So again, Dunland still have yet to lose a huge amount. They have lost some. You can see where they did attack the dwarves of Khazad Dum with some of their number. But ultimately most of their army is going around to instead potentially go after Rhudaur, a softer target. I have to say, the way Mr. Sneakman is moving here, he definitely has a plan. He's hoping to conserve most of his strength for the end, which of course is how you win a free-for-all. But Khazad Dum at this point, I doubt they have enough strength, having already taken on the Hobbits, having endured a small attack from Dunland. There goes Rhudaur's general at the hands of the cataphracts. And now they're going to have to take on Dorwinion as well. I don't think Khazad Dum are going to be left standing after this, to be honest with you. And unlike the Hobbits, who can sequester some of their units away, well, I say that, the mercenary crossmen are over here, so Khazad Dum also have saved something for later, which I think is going to be the theme of everyone's army, if they are able to do so. In come the Elvalin marksmen. Still a lot of Nandor Glade Riders here, and their shock value is so high that it's going to be a tough proposition to face them in these numbers, especially with such a small army left. But yeah, Khazad Dum's army is going to lie in ruins after this as well. The Meteor Guard are going to be a tough prospect to bring down, but in terms of pure numbers here, the most they can hope to do is leave a significant dent in Dorwinion's numbers to try and reduce their chance of winning later on. Meanwhile, there is Dunland, who are continuing to do laps of the arena, and no one is really paying them much attention, so I mean, Mr. Sneakman is going to continue to do that unless everyone else gets wise and realises that his army is still in good shape. Yes, it's mostly made up of just lower quality, higher numbers units, but come the late game, that is a huge amount of manpower for the battered remnants of everyone else to try and cut their way through. Nomadic Raiders still firing, Brotherhood of the Shadows still trying to do bits. Throwing those projectiles in, throwing daggers, just trying to do as one final spit in the eye really to Rhudaur as Khan's main army falls. I don't know if Kuro's got anything left alive that isn't routing. A lot of his units are routing off. Champions of Nafrat running through the Cardolan general. That may very well be the difference between victory and defeat here. The fact that the champions of Nafrat are still up. Myriad Spearmen are routing. Champions of Nafrat are now into the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, who won't stand a chance. They're a resilient spear unit, but the champions are pretty much ideally placed to deal with a unit like that. Demons of the Desert depleted. Wathlo trackers are back here, so yeah, I think ultimately Cardolan will fall, but they put up a good fight, to be fair, against Harad. And in much the same way as Karn, while they may end up losing this battle, they may very well have made it too difficult for the faction they were fighting to actually go on to win the battle as a whole. Meanwhile, what have we here? Eclipse's army trying to get into the best position, surround the dwarves entirely, but you can see that a combination of the Meteor Guard and the 1st Legion pikes, even when the situation is hopeless, they're going to take their toll on you. And so it has proven to be for Dorwinion here, especially against units like the Elvelyn, who don't really have the highest damage dealing capabilities, and when you're dealing with a unit that's got 3 hit points, as well as having the best Dwarven armour that there is, it's going to be tough for you. His cavalry is still here, the Morriquendi Gladelords, still 16 Lance Knights, which again, going to be impressive. Again, the crossbows came back over here, but that may have proved to be a mistake, to be honest with you, because they were always going to be zoned out by Elvelyn marksmen. And that is going to be Khazad Dum's best hope, really, of winning the fight, keeping those crossbows safe and using them in the late game to take some pot shots at whoever remains. It's going to be a similar story for the Hobbits, wherever they may be. I think they're over here, aren't they? Yes, indeed. Some Proudfoots managed to survive, some Hobbit, Tree and Arms, some Ents and the Bjornings. Perhaps the Great Eagles are around here as well, but they almost certainly went off into a corner to hide somewhere. They did manage to escape the Dorwinion cavalry's wrath after all. But this is a problem. A real problem for every other player on the field, because he really hasn't lost an awful lot, Mr. Sneakman. He's got plenty of veterans, plenty of cheap pikes, plenty of militia spears. He also has his Spears of Orthanc, which are a genuine damage dealer, so if there are any elites left standing, they can be focused down. Nomadic infantry are actually hiding, but they are going to be uncovered, unfortunately for them, by Warg Riders. I don't know if they're going to get... Well, they actually do get a charge, so Mr. Sneakman is paying attention. So they do see them, they do get a charge, and that nomadic infantry that he was hoping to keep hidden for the late game. Kuro can't catch a break here. Someone's army is gone, and I believe it's Cardolan, so technically the first army to fall entirely is Cardolan. Although I'm not really sure how much Kuro has left either. And there we go. That is the last of Karn's army, so in quick succession Cardolan and Karn are the first 2 to fall. Let's see what's going on over here, shall we? We've got some charging action going on by the looks of things, or at least Dorwinion's cavalry is moving over here to regroup with their main army. And now, Dorwinion, who to be fair, of all of the major armies other than Dunland, probably have the sort of main block of their force the most intact, but it's going to be tough dealing with that amount of numbers. I mean, they don't have enough Morriquendi pikes to cover every angle. They're going to have to rely on their cavalry here, I think. A couple of units of wargs, however, to defend the flanks. What's this? Mercenary crossbows from Khazad Dum. They need to be paying attention, because if they don't, those Warg Riders are going to hunt them down. But this isn't what wargs want to be doing, because they can be kited around very easily, especially against a unit with as much stopping power as mounted crossbowmen. And to be honest, I would probably want at least one unit of wargs over here getting ready to deal with what is inevitably going to be a Dorwinion attempt to circumvent your lines. In come Rhudaur. It's looking like this is a planned thing by Rhudaur, Dorwinion and what remains of Khazad Dum, because I think they now realise just how much Dunland still has left. And if they don't, by their powers combine, unite, they are going to be in real trouble. I mean, there's Blackwolds on the front line as well, which obviously a Berserker class unit, so multiple HP. Very similar, not quite as good, but similar to the Uruk-hai Berserkers, but the AP damage they do alongside the Bane Guard is going to be really bad news for stuff like the Elvelyn infantry. Dorwinion are not really very well suited to fighting a battle against units like this, especially not with very few elves left to them. Dunlanding veterans moving over here though, so Mr. Sneakman has peeled off a few elements of his army to prevent Rhudaur from coming to their aid as quickly. Obviously Dunland veterans will struggle against some of the units that Rhudaur still have available to them, but a single unit of these is still going to be enough to cause a substantial speed bump. They stop the Reforged javelins from moving into position. Spears of Orthanc are here as well. I mean, you can try and engage them in melee, you'd lose, but at least you'd stop them from using their crossbows. Dunland pikemen now turning around. I think they realise now that Dorwinion's front line is falling away very, very quickly, and you can see here Helvellyn marksmen getting swamped by more Dunland veterans. Dunland pikemen here. They're actually shaken though, taking some damage. What have we got on the front line? Yeah, you can see that this is the problem. Like, they're trying to engage the Dunland assault Dorwinion, but they just don't have enough numbers to cover everything sufficiently. They're going to have to use the cavalry, and to be fair, their cavalry is exceptionally damaging. All of it has got a charge bonus of 20 at this point, so as they charge into these lower tier units, they're going to do substantial damage. But let's not forget, the Dunland units have got a slight anti-cavalry bonus. Even the line infantry units here have got a bonus against cavalry. The wargs have too, so this could be the end of this unit of Nandor Glade Riders. Fragile unit of cavalry indeed. Just taking stock of everything as it now sort of converges on the centre. You can see Harad still have their champions. A very depleted army indeed, but still a factor in this battle. Whenever you've got a sort of really strong unit, and they've got demons as well. Time will tell how much damage Dunland take. Their lack of quality could be a problem here. They have the numbers, and they ultimately will emerge, especially from the fight against Dorwinion, I would imagine, looking decent. But they've got a target on their back now. Everyone is going to be trying to go after them, and there goes the Demons of the Desert, killing two birds with one stone, as it were, by killing Dunlanders and Men of Rhudaur. There's still these wargs as well. Having cavalry at this stage in the battle could be such an important thing. Mercenary crossbows are going to be able to get into a position to really fire in. They're firing into, I think, the Blackwolds. Among the better targets for those crossbows to go after, but I mean, they have also been firing in here. Yeah, those Attenmore Trollhunts are breaking a mass route actually from a lot of things as the Blackwolds arrive. I don't know where the Beornings are, but the Hobbits actually, they are starting to move towards the battle now. Nandor Glade Guard revealed themselves, so Dorwinion did have units still hidden way in the back. And again, Kelton River Patrol, a unit of Glade Guard. Interesting units to reveal at this late stage. Javelins in particular can be really useful against marauding units of cavalry such as the Beornings, and potentially the Great Eagles as well, wherever they may be. If they still live, they could have been caught earlier on in the battle for all I know. That crossbows are still there. Dunman spears. Quite so. Another army bites the dust. It's not Dorwinion. Is it Rhudaur? It could be. Yeah, Rhudaur's army is routing. Their morale abandons them after their general died much earlier in the battle, but then Dunland focused them down with some Blackwolds and their Spears of Orthanc and some supporting units, and that is ultimately going to be the end. So Rhudaur is the next faction to fall. Harad still lives. Still have a few units. We can't really rely on the minimap anymore because I think the game isn't really used to battles like this, so the minimap now just shows a few of the units. There are the Great Eagles. They charge into the back of Dorwinion. I mean, to be fair, if I were the Hobbits, I would want some revenge on Dorwinion as well, and poor Eclipse, he saved those Nandor Glade Guard for the end as a bit of a reinforcement action. He is being punished now by the Hobbits. Earlier on, of course, those 3 units of Nandor Glade Riders really dealt the Hobbits a stinging blow, and now it could be that Dorwinion's final hopes are being crushed by the Hobbits, really. And they could be the next faction to fall by the wayside, to be honest with you. Khazad Dum is still around somewhere, I think, with their Merc crossbows. Indeed, there they are, but they're being chased off by Dunland's wargs. Dunland are trying to regroup their army, get out of the trees, because things are a little bit chaotic, and they definitely don't want to be put at the mercy of any more volleys from the demons of the desert. Just 2 Great Eagles remain, so Dorwinion has managed to sort of silence them, and that one Great Eagle is, yeah, he's going to get skewered by all of those pikemen. Wargs trying to get in here to stop the final one, and there he goes. But the Great Eagles there, actually, less so with Dunland, but against Dorwinion, I think they probably just ended Eclipse's chances of winning this battle. The Hobbits are in a good place, actually. A reasonably good place, anyway. I think Dunland probably have too much left, though, to be honest with you. The Hobbits and Harad are going to have to work together, but they're very depleted armies at this point. They have quality. but I just don't think they're going to be able to hack their way through all of these Dunland units. But no one stopped Mr. Sneakman from just walking around the edge of the battle and then committing later against Rhudaur and Khan when they were already on their knees. The Hobbits charged in against Khazad Dum. Excuse me, my voice is going. But I think it was Dorwinion's decision actually to crush the Hobbits with their cavalry which really shaped this battle. And it was one of the reasons why things escalated over here in the three-way battle between the dwarves, hobbits, and men and elves of Dorwinion. Excuse me. Ooh, apologies for that. Hopefully my voice will last until the end of this one. But yeah, it escalated into a three-way war over here because of Dorwinion's choice, I think. And even here in the late game, that grudge, I think, carried through because the Hobbits could have helped focus down Dunland, but instead they decided to strike out against Dorwinion. I don't know what Dorwinion have left. I assume it's cavalry, because they really don't have anything left in terms of infantry at this point. They just didn't have enough to withstand Dunland. The Demons of the Desert now also being focused. I mean, it's now or never for the Hobbits. Harad have moved in. They're doing something, so the Hobbits also need to follow suit. It's all or nothing, really. Khazad Dum are also continuing to fire their crossbow bolts, which will have an impact, but I'm just not sure whether even just in terms of sheer ammunition at this point, I'm just not sure whether they're going to be able to do the business. And of course, Harad's scattered remnants are going to struggle here as, once again, Dunland turns their full focus on them. The Bjornings just about managing to dodge those spears and those pikes. They are going to charge in over here against the spears of Orthanc and Dunland spearmen. This could be fairly, well, what are they going to do here? They're going after Blackwalds? I mean, this should be a fairly damaging charge. They get into loose formation, but a little bit too late, I think, if they were hoping to mitigate some of the damage there. They didn't take that many losses, but the Bjornings taking another hit. Was that a crossbow bolt that hit them then? Again, they just cannot set their old grudges aside if that's the case. The dwarves, Dorwinion and the hobbits murdering one another at the expense of their chances of victory, and Mr. Sneakman, the smart one here, is ultimately going to be able to carry this one home, I would think. There's still work to be done just because of the calibre of some of the units he's got to face off against. Not so much the beast hunters, but where are the champions of Nathrat? They must have been committed at some stage, surely. The demons were destroyed. I think they'd probably used up all their ammunition though, to be brutally honest. Hobbitry and arms are there. Proudfoot protectors still have a bit of ammunition. Crossbows could be a difference maker. Yeah, the Ents really don't want to be in and around the Blackwalds. That's the kind of unit that troll class units tend to do pretty poorly against, these high damage units. Morroquendi Stalkers revealing themselves. So this is what Dorwinion had left, so they still had units that were hidden. So fair play. These, I mean, horse archers like this could be a real problem for Dunland, actually. The Ents are trying to get away. Some of them are still stuck, though, on the Blackwalds. And you can see, actually, the Hobbits retreating as Dunland chased them. How best to deal with this kind of unit at this stage? I mean, I think... What's that over there? Mercenary crossbowmen still alive. They're still firing at something. What are they firing at? Routing units. So they're on fire at will then, which is maybe not the wisest course. But blindness is still technically a part of this battle. I'm not sure whether a battered unit of mercenary crossmen is going to be able to deliver a killing blow to anything, but who knows? I've seen stranger things happen in this game. Meanwhile, over here, Morroquendi Stalkers, they're going to do tons of damage to stuff like these Dunland pikemen. Elven quality damage, the poison arrows as well means they're going to rout just that a little bit quicker. And just based on the calibre of their units, Dunland are not exactly known for their morale. In come the Ents. They're going to try and do some damage. There are still Blackwalds in here though, so I mean this could be the end of the Ents, but they're going to do some damage here to the Dunlanders. Proudfoot protectors still firing away. Here are the wargs. They're going to want to steer clear of the wargs, to be honest with you, the Bjornings, because it's not so much that they won't win that fight, but they're going to need to get, well, I mean, I suppose that's kind of a favourable engagement, but the Bjornings are going to need to live just in order for something to be able to deal with those stalkers. Dorwinion could yet go on to win this battle just by keeping some stuff back in reserve. Charge in here to the half-orc Bane Guard, which routs almost immediately. This is a large cluster of cavalry. And it's actually at this point where maybe Dunland and the Hobbits need to look at themselves and think, I'm not liking these odds. There's still 8 Glade Lords, so yeah, I mean, that amount of cavalry is a real problem, and Dunland is going after the Hobbits. But, I mean, yes, they have the Bjornings and the Ents, but they're so low in number. That's the issue here, I think. Proudfoot Protectors are getting just overwhelmed in melee. Dunland have already put Dorwinion's infantry lines to the sword by doing this very thing. They finished off Rhudaur, they finished off Harad. But they may not have enough left in the tank. Do they have any missiles? Do they have ammunition left in the Spears of Orthanc? If they do, they should consider using it now. They still have their crossbows drawn, so I would think they do. The wargs are just hunting the Bjornings down. You should probably turn around at this point, because then they'll be sandwiched between... well, they're routing, I suppose, so I guess it doesn't really make much of a difference. But the Hobbits managed to weasel away, just about. There's still some units over here getting killed, the Farmers of Buckland, but their infantry once again finished off by Dunland. But do they have enough manpower left? I mean, eventually, of course... They will run out of ammunition, these Morroquendi Stalkers, but by then Dunland could very well have taken too much damage. And then it will become a case of cycle charging. Will the Stalkers have what it takes to cycle charge stuff like the Spears of Orthanc into oblivion? I'm not so sure. They managed to spot a weaker section of line there, made up mostly of veterans, but the veterans close in. There goes Barlow on horseback. Killed by the Harad general, interestingly enough. Over here? Yes, it is. A duel between the general. Well, I say a duel. There was one other man over here, but he's not going to be a match for the Harad general, who was in the Serpent Guard, which is an interesting place for him to be. Harad's still there. Khazad Dum, the next ones to fall. And so that leaves Harad, Dunland, the Hobbits, and Dorwinion. 4 factions still have a presence on the field. This, however, is going to be kind of a strange close to this battle, but I mean, they still have Eagles. Another unit of Eagles, were they hidden? That's a fresh unit of Great Eagles. So they're engaging in also some hidden unit shenanigans and a unit of Great Eagles here in the late game. I mean, one charge into the Morroquendi Stalkers and it will cut them down to size. They're going to need to try and shoot them, I suppose. The longer they stay in range of the Great Eagles, you can see actually some of them are starting to fall. Morroquendi Glade Lords. Was that the Dorwinion general or was that the Hobbit general? Let's have a look at the dead bodies. It was the Dorwinion general, so that's a bit of a problem. I think, you know, based on the fact that it's mostly elven units remaining, morale isn't the biggest problem for them. The Awnings are over there, wargs are over there. It's really become a game of chess at this point. Most of the way throughout this battle it's been about brute force and just choosing when to engage. Just bodies littering, particularly this central section of the battlefield. The only fight that really happened around the very edge was up here between Harad and Cardolan. Everything else happened sort of within the perimeter that these rock formations make up. 4 generals remain on the field, 13 Great Eagles. The Great Eagles are over here, and they are actually going after... Are they going after Dunland? It would be interesting to see if Dunland and the Hobbits have come to an understanding. The Ents, however, they're being utterly surrounded by the Morroquendi Stalkers, but they do get a charge, but I mean, they are horse archers at the end of the day. They don't have quite the same oomph as something like the Glade Lords do, and you can tell by the amount of bodies left by the Ents there that it's a real problem. Do they have the strength? Could it be the Hobbits that go on to win this fight? I mean, 13 Great Eagles is extremely tough to deal with at this late stage. Because I don't think they're going to have the ammunition to shoot all of them. They're certainly not going to have the ammunition to kite around Ents, Bjornings and Great Eagles. The Hobbits are going to have access to one extremely powerful unit regardless of what happens here. The Wargs are still over here, but Dunland are trying to scurry to a position where they can possibly wall up with their pikes and their spears, which would make the Hobbits' job much more difficult, but they're going to take another charge here. Those Dunland spearmen are probably going to rout off as a result of that. Yep, there they go. Spears of Orthanc and Blackwolds are significant units though. Warg Riders routing off as a result of being caught by the Stalkers, but in turn the Stalkers get caught by the Bjornings. That could prove to be something that certainly wasn't worthwhile as Dorwinion bleed yet more cavalry. Harad is still alive. And there he is, I assume. Yep, that's the Serpent Guard. The Harad General is still on the field. If Harad go on to win this, it'll be probably the most remarkable victory I've seen. Good volley though there. Into the Bjornings, several of them fall. This is a sign their hit points are gone, because they do bear the same weakness really as the Wargs in many ways. Once their hit points are gone, very, very vulnerable to missiles. They don't really have armour as such. And that could be the end of them, but it's close. It's competitive. What have we got going on over here? Blackwolds getting charged into. Still, well, I mean, Samwise is still up, but he's the only Bjorning left. As he runs for the hills, there's still a lot of Ents though. There he goes. The Hobbit General, Samwise himself, has been slain. Still a decent amount of Morroquendi Stalkers this, but it's all going to come down to ammunition, I think. And the thing is, at this point, Dunland are probably the least likely to come out on top, other than Harad, I guess. Because Dunland, they only have infantry. They can only really wait until the enemy decides to engage them. Whether that be being shot by Dorwinion or whether it's being charged into by the Hobbits. Albeit there's not really any Hobbits remaining at this point. There is only Eagles and Ents. Forward they go. This one Haradrim soldier that remains. What have we got going on over here? They're trying to shoot the Eagles, and they do manage to pin one of them with a good shot. This could be the future of this battle though. Like, I think it is ultimately going to come down to... It is an interesting choice actually from the Hobbits to charge in there with the Ents. They're going to do some pretty crippling damage to the Dunmen there. They're hoping to rout them because those pikes, that could be a... It's a pretty serious error, to be honest with you, because now the Stalkers are going to be in range to shoot them, and it's going to take them a little while to get out of range again. But the Ents, they are going to do some significant damage to what remains of Dunland. Another charge from the Great Eagles. They're trying to destroy Dunland here. In come the Morroquendi Stalkers. Are going to try and charge into the Ents, and the Ents are falling. There goes Dunland. So Dunland have fallen by the wayside now. 3 factions remain. The Hobbits, Dorwinion, and technically Harad. Albeit, if Harad, like I said, if Harad win this, it will be insanity to say the least. Look at this man. He just wants a glorious end at the hands of those majestic beasts. The Eagles are the key here, because like one charge, I mean, to be fair, like if they charged in here now, those Morroquendi Stalkers, they need to keep moving. They're going to get attacked by the Ents here. They're not going to get a counter charge either, so more of those Dorwinion riders are going to fall. I say more, just the one actually, which not a great return. What is that one Harad rider going to do? Dorwinion spreading their cavalry out a little bit, trying to catch them. Ah, Harad do have a bit more. They have Champions of Nafarat. I mean, technically speaking, that's something which could win them the battle, but I guess not now, because they're going to get charged by the Eagles, which the Champions of Nafarat have already seen combat, so... Those Stalkers are close. Those Stalkers may be out of ammunition now, though, if they're charging in like this and not firing, because they're in range, so I'd assume they are out of ammunition. Oh, that was a bit of indecision there. Indecision. If he committed to that charge, he would have done a lot of damage. Still 6 Ents. Is that 8 Great Eagles or is it 7? 7 Great Eagles. There's a lot of power bound up in very few unit models. They're going to have to make a choice here at some point. The Glade Lords are still there. Even just 4 of them can be a problem. It might be worth charging into them just to deal with them, to be honest with you. The Harad General is still hunting down these Ents. I mean, to be fair, 18 Champions of Nafrat up against 6 already damaged Ents. That could go pretty poorly for the Ents, if we're being honest. Although this should be the end of the Harad General. He's going to get passed around by Treebeard and his mates here. It's been a really interesting battle, this. As interesting as I hoped it would be based on the premise. Here in the late game, where people have like lost large portions of their army, they've been wondering how best to approach things. It has ultimately come down to people hiding units away for later, which free-for-alls often have a little bit of that going on, but especially with 8-way free-for-alls, where it's almost like the ultimate Mexican standoff, really. You always need to keep something in reserve, and I think that's what Kuro wanted to do with his Brotherhood of the Shadows, which we saw, of course. There's the Harad General gone. Charging into the Ents there, are they going to be able to finish them off? At this point the Great Eagles are so far from the action, like, again the Ents are going to take their share. More of that Dorwinion cavalry falls. The Ents need to stay away from the Champions of Nafrat though. They're about to get pinned between all manner of units here. The Ents doing the right thing though, they're sort of getting the Dorwinion cavalry on the other side of them, and in come the Champions. Champions of Nafrat, not really the sort of thing the Dorwinion riders want to be involved with in melee, but there go the last of the Ents. Unfortunately there, it wasn't really the Hobbit's plan that was incorrect, it was just that the Champions of Nafrat kind of didn't do the thing that Ammar wanted them to do, which was to follow through with their charge quickly onto the Dorwinion cavalry. Oh, that was a mistake. He should be going after the cavalry here, he shouldn't be trying to charge after the Champions of Nafrat. Deal with the fast movers first. You can deal with the Champions of Nafrat at your leisure, but he got sideswiped a little bit there by the Dorwinion Cav, and he may end up seriously regretting that, because he did lose yet another Great Eagle model. Needs to do something up against these Stalkers, to be honest with you. That's another good charge. I don't see how they can bring the Great Eagles down as long as... well... the Great Eagles not being able to attack in melee is a serious concern. Is that the end of Harad? No, there's still 3 of them remaining. The Great Eagles charging again. I mean, it's looking like Dorwinion are going to be the ones to come out on top here. There are still 4 Great Eagles. As they charge in, they're going to lose more unit models as time goes along. They actually connect with the Champions of Nafrat as well. If they're still going after the Champions of Nafrat, I'd question why on earth they're doing that. They're clearly not the main danger here. I think it's Dorwinions. I think they're going to take it home. 2 Great Eagles isn't enough. They don't have enough oomph to win this battle anymore. And I think now they should just face their fate with honour. Standing still there, but what a close battle. Just some scattered Dorwinion cavalry is going to be all that remains. That is the end of the Great Eagles. So the Hobbits are gone. And that is that. Dorwinion victorious with around 60 riders left. And that was every bit as chaotic and back and forth as I wanted it to be. So big thank you to Kuro for sending this battle replay to me, because this is the sort of thing which I think a lot of people have wanted to see in Medieval 2 for a while, and the fact that they've been able to get it to work is obviously a really good thing. You can only do it through scenarios, so you do have to sort of pre-make the scenarios, which means if you want to pick your own armies, you kind of have to hand your army compositions into a scenario creator, and they will then do their thing. Obviously this does require a certain amount of trust, of course, because whoever's making the scenario could take a look at everyone's composition and then try and counterpick, but I would argue that counterpicking is very difficult in an 8-way free-for-all, just in general. So having a look here at the kills, the biggest amount of kills goes to Harad, but a lot of that has to do with the large Cardolan army which they had all to themselves, really, and they of course were continuing to get kills further into the game as well. The fewest amount of kills was actually from the Hobbits, which is quite interesting, but then their main army was so soundly defeated as a result of that Dorwinion cavalry charging in from behind. And of course, Eclipse and Dorwinion were ultimately the faction which won the battle in the end. So let's have a little look at what did the damage for Khand at the very least. They went out among the earliest. They weren't the earliest, of course, but they only just managed to outlast Cardolan. Brotherhood of the Axe did very well in melee, actually, which is interesting because Rhudaur aren't the sort of faction which tends to rely overly on their armour, but the high damage that the Brotherhood of the Axe can do still ultimately carried the day there. The Variag Cataphracts and the Storm Guard did very well also. Brotherhood of the Shadows carved their way through a lot of the lower tier units in the back for Rhudaur, but ultimately it wasn't enough to turn the tide of the battle in the way that Kuro probably was hoping for. Nomadic Infantry did okay. The Hwacha also, they had to use it up close. I mean, it was a situation where Kuro had to rapidly adapt, and he ultimately did quite well at that, but in the end, he just didn't have enough to deal with the, especially when it comes to the up-close battles, of course, like the pikes, the Franadine pikemen are going to be quite difficult, and obviously when things are up close and personal like that, the javelins and axe throwers of Rhudaur can really come into their own. But he did a pretty good job, because Rhudaur ultimately, from the position they were left in after that battle, were never really going to affect the result in the way that perhaps Steward of Dale would have wanted. But yeah, big thank you to Kuro for sending this one in. I know that this is the sort of thing that he's going to want to do more of in the future, and I certainly look forward to that, because again, it's something which people have wanted in Medieval 2 for a while at this point, and to see it in action is good and very chaotic, very fun to behold as well. Obviously, you can't really have a lore-friendly 8-way free-for-all as well, so that doesn't really become a concern when you're talking about something such as this. But yes, as for what's coming next, I think there will already have been a stream, because I'm recording this on the Saturday. So there will already have been a stream, I think, on Monday, because the idea is that this will be out on Tuesday. From here on, there should be another stream this week, possibly on Thursday or Friday, and then over the weekend there will be another battle replay also coming out, which should be another one of Spirit of Thunder's scenario battles, which is inspired from a real-life battle. One of his, I think it's going to be another one of the Roman-inspired ones. I think that's where he's sticking for the time being. I think Caesarians against Pompeians is the theme this time around, so I will definitely look forward to that. Another siege. Those were a good deal of fun when we saw them last time, so I'm glad that he's back to making them, because new stuff is obviously the lifeblood of the game as it keeps being developed. So yep, look forward to that. Obviously further into the future, again, it's a little bit harder to say because I don't know what replays I'll have at my disposal at that point in time. But obviously the streams will keep coming, I think, certainly from now until mid to late September, where sort of university starts to grind into action again after the lengthy period of lockdown. The streams will still continue, but I can do them a little bit more often, which I do intend to do up until that point now. I'm going to try and aim for 2 a week if I can. So that's overall that's the idea at the very least, and I will be trying to make more liberal use as well of the YouTube sort of notifications thing, where I sort of post out a post to tell people when I'm actually going to be streaming and when sort of videos are coming out, so it gives people a little bit more information ahead of time rather than just the scattershot approach that I've been doing at the moment. So hopefully that'll make things a little bit easier for people to sort of understand my schedule with regards to that. But yeah, big thank you to Kuro and all of the players once again for a really high quality and new battle that we've seen obviously with this 8-way free-for-all. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.